Hello and welcome to the Small YouTuber Show. I'm your host, Johnny, and I'm with my good friend LD. And today we are going to be discussing if the US has finally lost its dominance as the world power. But first, if you're watching this in the live stream, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate you being with us. It's really nice to have people in the crowd. But if you're also watching it on repeat, hit that thumbs up for me and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So, LD, how have you been?
Yeah, pretty good, bro. Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
it's
week.
been an
Good week.
interesting week of news, has it not?
Yes. I mean, why do you say that?
Well, to be honest with you, we could go straight into it and then we can discuss, because obviously, for those of you who don't know, between me and LD, we take turns in the subject matter. We literally, one week it's LD doing it, then the next week it's me, and this week it was my turn. And I thought, what could we talk about? And I went on the news and I thought, that's quite interesting. So before I actually explain why we are talking about this today, I want to play a game with you, Mr. D. Are you ready for it?
Go for it, man.
Right. Okay.
I'm a bit slow today, but go on. Go on.
Oh, right. I want you to tell me, what have all of these people that I'm about to name have in common, right? Patrice Lumumba, who was Congo's first prime minister.
I already know where you're going.
Rafael Trujillo, who was the Dominican Republic dictator. Or Sarkono of Indonesia, who was president of Indonesia. Now, this is going to be a difficult one. Godindem, or I could be saying that. No, if I'm saying his name really bad, I apologize.
I hope you're not butchering that, man.
I think I am. It could be Ngo, or it could be Godindim, who was the president of South Vietnam. Salvador Allende, who was the Chile president. 3 more. Slobodan Milosevic, who was Serbian president. Saddam Hussein, and Muammar Gaddafi. What do all of these wonderful people in history all have in common?
I was just about to say something that would have been wrong to say, so I'm not going to say that.
I've posed a question to you, and I want you to tell me, what do they all have in common?
I'm guessing that they ended up at the wrong end of a deal with the United States, or should we say maybe the CIA?
Well, I never. So, as you well know, we have not conferred. So I know that putting you on the test, putting you on the spot there, it could have gone one of two ways. You could have been like, I have no idea, but you're on the same page as me. But let me just clarify. Unsealed documents have revealed that each one of those wonderful people were either unalived or removed from power with the help of the CIA. So all of those countries, and let's remember, we're talking Congo, Congo, Dominican Republic, Indonesia, South Vietnam, Chile, Serbia, Iraq, and Libya. All of those countries' futures were changed by the dominance of American might. That's very interesting, isn't it? When you think about it like that, you realize these are all unsealed documents. Anyone can see this. But American might dictated who would be in power around the world. And that domination has been, almost for 100 years. We're talking, a good strong 80 years at least. There has been that level of dominance that not only will I be able to control what happens in my own country, i.e. the United States, I will also be able to dictate what goes on in other countries, so long as it follows the ethos of what the Americans want to portray. Now, that's very interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that you kind of have on one side people who want to determine their own future. And then on the other side, people who are willing to maybe sacrifice some of that in order to go along with the the dominant culture, society.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, like a lot of the times when you see a lot of leaders who have been in charge for a long period of time and they haven't been unalived by the CIA, I'm wondering what sort of deal have they managed to get, or
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's some sort of horse trading has gone on in order to secure their future and keep them in power for like 35, 40 years.
Definitely.
Huh?
So keeping in mind that those people that I've just spoken about, that was the past. But what about now? Now, as I said earlier on, the reason why I wanted us to talk about the domination, whether or not it's weakening, strengthening, that's for you guys watching to decide. But I saw a report on the news this morning where it was that China had openly rejected a demand by the United States to cut Iranian oil imports. Now, this was reported by Bloomberg, so I'm not making this up. This is Bloomberg news agency have basically said that people who were aware of the negotiations, the ambassadors and whatnot, are very aware that China are blatantly saying, no, we will not be dictated by you.
How long ago was this?
This was this morning.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
This was this morning. Yeah. So this very morning, I literally woke up. So because obviously, for those of you that don't know, the agreement that I have with LD is that we usually give each other at least a few days' notice of the subject by Wednesday of that week, and I kind of didn't tell you till this morning. And that was partly because I genuinely wanted to have a subject that I thought would be really topical and fresh,
current,
exactly. And this was probably a perfect discussion because it's in the news right now, And then it made me think, well, if China is openly saying, no, we will not do that. We will not stop buying Iranian oil, from Iran. And we've discussed in a previous episode the BRICS nations openly trying to de-dollarize themselves.
Yep.
This is not in the history of the the world economic and military power that is the United States. They have never had this before. They may have had small little nations that they've pretty much sanctioned into oblivion.
Yep.
But they've never had a country
open defiance
from a country whose economy, army, influence around the world is arguably not the same as them, but it's getting quite close. And so I thought it would be good for us to discuss that today. So
it's a good topic. It's a good topic.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We could probably start by saying that, at the end of the Second World War, there was only one power left. So, up until the war, United Kingdom and its allies, Commonwealth, Empire, whichever you want to call it, they were the main dogs. They ruled the waves for 100 years. Once they destroyed the Napoleonic fleet, they ruled the waves for the next 100 years. No one could come anywhere near them. And slowly but surely, their cousins across the pool in America was just slowly just building up their nation, creating for themselves a utopia where they didn't get involved. Earlier on in America's history, they were like, no way we getting sucked into European nonsense. We're not doing it. And then they got sucked into the First World War. They said, no, we're never going to do it again. We're not going to get sucked in. And they got sucked into the Second World War. Obviously, once we had Pearl Harbor. And during that time, so from that moment on, after those two nuclear bombs pretty much over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, decimated the Japanese war effort and ultimately ended the Second World War, there was no other, we had the Cold War with the Soviet Union, but there was no major power playing with them, in the free. Go on, what are you going to say?
You just cut out.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. There was no major player in the free world. You had the Russians and the Soviets over in their block. But they were left. We left them to them, do what you want. You're fine over there. You're not part of our market, so we'll just dominate everything else. And that went on forever until the wall went down. But now we have China with a strong economy, amazing growth, like quite scary growth. It has become a very central force in global markets, and it has jumped into the spots where historically the Europeans and the Americans have jumped out. With the Belt and Road Initiative, they've sometimes we can see, well, that was a bad idea. Don't loan those people money. They've got none anyway. You can't pay it back. And we know that there was, that they're doing their own form of empire building through trade. But the fact is that the influence is not as strong with the Americans now, especially in, as you said, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, and now with the influx of the
plus countries. Do you know what I
mean? There's more countries that potentially could say, no, we're not going to do that. And you could try and sanction us, but we have a strong enough economy around us now that we can say no. You can try and sanction. As we said, the well-known sanctions of Iran is just being bypassed by China. China are like, yeah, you can sanction them, but we're still going to buy oil. Well, then there's no sanction, then, is there? Which is quite crazy. Then, obviously, where we live, we're in Europe. The European Union, obviously, I know it is many countries, and they're not all talking to each other, and they have their rivalries. But that European market is massive, and it also is attracting, economic growth away from the States and into Europe, and it's asserting its authority in terms of its independence in global affairs. Now, I don't want to go too deep into the whole NATO thing, because obviously, if certain people come into power in America, NATO may not exist as we see it, because America may pull out. It could do, and Europe will then have to stand on their own.
Isn't that what Trump was saying?
Trump is saying that, yeah. So Trump is saying that if they were to, if he comes into power, no, what he was saying was that if the European powers don't put 2% of their GDP into NATO, then we'll pull out. And I can understand that. America's putting in billions of pounds to continue the security and safety of the world. Well, all of the other countries that were in Europe were saying, well, if America doing it, why do we have to do it? If America were putting money in, we don't need to. We'll just sit back and chill. And then obviously we had the Russian situation right now in Ukraine, and European countries are like,
maybe we should.
Maybe we not. Obviously countries like Poland, Norway, Sweden, the Baltic countries like Estonia, Latvia, they are now they're now looking down on Big Brother on their right on their doorstep, and they are going to need to improve on their military might, because as we were talking about, if America were to pull out, Europe would be on its own, and that could potentially be quite dangerous. But then that's Europe. We've talked about China, we've got Europe, but then you also have countries like South Korea, Taiwan. These countries are market leaders in chip development, telecommunications, and obviously the car markets are huge in China, Japan. There's so many markets now that for the last 100 years were just pretty much ruled by the States. Now they have very noticeable competition, and so that in another way could be another chip away at the the hegemony of influence that the US has over the world. The last one I wanted to point out, and as I said, we were talking about what was in the news, was America has put in, Biden signed a paper yesterday, basically forcing TikTok to either sell itself to an American owner, or
Yeah.
however that works, or be banned. Now that's
Yeah.
quite interesting because, a company that is not registered in America is being told you must basically sell yourself. I
Yeah.
find it quite fascinating.
I mean, it sounds draconian maybe to us over here,
Yeah,
but if you flip the script and said, could an American company go into China and do what he wanted
that would never happen.
that easily? And
But we both know that
yeah,
would
exactly,
literally
it would
never
never
happen.
happen. Yeah,
No. So it's very
yeah.
interesting.
So I understand it. They're just kind of playing, almost saying, right, well, we'll play by the same kind of rules that you play by, in a
yeah.
sense.
So there is
You know?
there is precedent though of TikTok being banned, and that's India. In India,
Really?
where,
Okay.
so
I didn't know that.
basically, when there was the troubles in I don't know what you would call it, the in the northern part of India, the southern part of China, that land is no man's land. I can't think of the actual term, but it's disputed. So
Okay.
the Chinese believe it's their land, the Indians believe it's their land, and so that land is disputed. And so there was a fracas between the Chinese soldiers and Indian soldiers in this particular area. I don't know if I've got Pradesh in my head, but I can't. I could be completely wrong. But there's an area whereby there is disputed land, and they are arguing over it. And as a result of that, the Indian Parliament basically untethered itself from anything Chinese. Quite literally,
Okay.
it literally untethered itself. It stopped everything. So anything that could potentially be remotely linked to, China, and i.e. the government there, they just stopped it. They banned it. So TikTok as a service is just not usable in India unless you go through a VPN. Don't get me wrong. That's
Yeah.
what the I always feel
That's
like,
what everyone's going to do anyway, aren't they? Yeah.
obviously there are big business, but obviously the business side of it. If you are running TikTok as a business, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to run that business through a VPN long term. I mean, don't get me wrong. There'll probably be a way of doing it,
Yep.
but I would imagine that if TikTok was to actually be banned in the US, then the likes of Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and maybe even a new entity will just come out of the ground to basically all that traffic of young people and businesses that are using TikTok to either just showcase their content.
Yep.
They will probably be they'll probably be using that. But this is what I mean. The idea that the Americans have put, so the president, imagine it, a president has dictated that a company from another country must now sell it. It must be sold. If I'm wrong in the concept of it, I'm almost certain that was the gist of the law. They either need.
Why do you think that they've done that now, though?
Why do I think that the Americans have done it now?
Yeah.
So there was the first reason, arguably, is the whole concept of, is there a back door in TikTok where our data can be seen by people, foreign? But I always find that quite hypocritical because they do that with us now.
Yeah.
It's already been done.
Everything. Yeah.
Everything is
That's with
already
everything.
been. There's this giant, massive, memory store bank of a bajillion gigabytes or whatever whatever the max, this huge system
Exactly.
which is just basically storing everything we do. And that could be one side of it. So there is the idea of national security. Could be that. It could also be that it's an election year and Biden wants to get some points. A little bit like what Sunak is doing with smoking, like what we spoke about, last week. So it could be that.
I did hear something about the lobby groups to do with, I think, Israel.
Okay.
Because what they were saying is that they were either Russia or China were manipulating TikTok and the algorithm to promote pro-Palestine, anti-Israel.
I don't think
so
I don't. Yeah. Well, that could also be. Yeah. So I see what you're saying.
yeah,
So I saw. Funny enough, I watched a TikTok this morning where it was saying that several well-known journalists, one on LBC, in fact, I think two on LBC, one on BBC News, maybe, who has openly challenged the what's going on in Israel at the moment, and they are now nowhere to be seen. And it wasn't like they were
really.
saying they're nowhere to be seen. They have not seen live television since. They were like, and that was the news at 10. Thank you very much. And then you don't see him again because they've been put on the naughty step.
Yep,
And so obviously they didn't make a big thing of it. But obviously we as ordinary people have gone, well, where's that person? I liked that person's delivery. Well, where have they gone? Why are they not here anymore? And so, they are not able, because in many ways we do not have a free press. If you say anything that doesn't go with the narrative, you're potentially going to be shut down for a number of reasons. We won't go into that, but ultimately there does seem to be the mainstream media has a great amount of control, and they have a narrative, and the narrative will stay that way until otherwise. However, because TikTok is not based in the US, it can pump out whatever it wants. It literally can. It can pump out, and in many ways, lots of stories that may not make it into the mainstream have not made it to the mainstream, but they have made it on TikTok. So there could be a very good reason why that could be another reason why TikTok would be banned. And yes, that is obviously a very, very good reason. However, that isn't the only. So obviously we're talking about the influence of influence of America. And years ago, I personally believe 10 years ago, that decision would have already been made and done and dusted. Thank you very much. See you later. TikTok no longer exists. It would have been done. I strongly believe that the force and the coercion that the States has, the soft power, hard power, whatever way you want to look at it, would have just pushed that through and at the end of it. But we're in different times now. We're in much different times. And so suddenly this company is going to say, okay, we'll take it to court. We'll fight it in court. Let's go. Let's see whether you can infringe on my rights. We'll use the courts against. We'll use your laws to do what we want to do. And I think also, with that in mind, that's probably another reason why, from the worldwide perspective, if someone can challenge the status quo, then why can't I change this? Why can't I do it? Why can't this person do it? Why can't that person do it? You see what I mean? It's almost like it's like a domino effect. One person does it, oh, I can do it as well then. And I think that the whole model of
we just cut.
Again, sorry, I believe that there is.
Just cut.
Did it really? Oh, I apologize there. I'm having some issues with the internet, but if you are on the outside looking into the States, you probably will see, obviously capitalism, the way in which they govern, and you might not agree with it. I know it sounds silly, but you just might not agree with how they run things. Do you get what I mean? You might think, well, you've got these political divides, but you're all on the same side. You may be a Republican or a Democrat, but you're pretty much doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
You're showing vulnerability. You're the equivalent of your ruling house was raided by regular people. One guy with, I don't know what was it he was wearing, some crazy hat.
The Viking hat.
Was it Viking or like their
Viking dude?
Yeah,
He looked like a
you know,
surfer with a Viking
yeah,
hat on.
they're
Yeah,
buffalo
yeah,
horn
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
and it just made the whole concept of their democracy. It made it a
I
bit
actually I do think that that did have a really detrimental,
of course it
just the
did,
optics alone, of that,
100%. You know,
seeing some overweight dudes trying to scale this wall, and yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, that's
when you
crazy.
realize that countries in Asia run their systems efficiently,
Mm,
you know, they we may not agree with how they do things, but they
mm,
run things very differently to how it is done in the West. And when you realize that that sort of resilience isn't there now, I worry about the coming elections. I believe that the coming elections are going to show even more cracks in what is going on in
well,
that space.
that was one of the things that I was going to say. I do
Yeah,
think that the social, I mean, if we're talking about is the US dominance over, and we're
yeah,
arguing to say yes,
mm,
then some of the things that I would have looked at, one being social cohesion.
hmm,
Yeah. So America's like a tale of two cities at the moment. It, to me, is like, I don't know if you've seen the like scenes in Philadelphia or in Los Angeles with there's you got the Skid Row in Los Angeles. Is
oh
that
yeah,
right? With all the, like a homeless city,
homeless people.
basically.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. That's probably
and
something
then
we'll talk
also
about later on at a later date.
yeah, and then
That'd be a good
there's
subject.
opioid crisis.
Yeah, definitely.
Philadelphia, there are like drugged out zombies just literally nodding out in the
I
street.
know.
You know, and then you've got all of this going on, and then they're pumping out money to Ukraine,
Mhm.
Israel, all these other places, and you're like, why are you trying to focus on all these other things when there's clearly so many issues
Yeah.
in your backyard? It's
Mm.
yeah. So I
I
think
mean,
there's
you know,
going to
that's very
definitely be a
interesting
problem.
because it's very interesting you mentioned that because that is their domestic policy. You know, their domestic policies, what are going on right now, are quite detrimental to the people that live actually in the United States.
Yeah.
But if we talk about their foreign policy, if we talk about the prolonged engagements, like the wars, um,
Hmm.
the you know, this was a power that it could just say, it could just warn you. How many presidents over the years have said, if you do this, we will do that, and then they go, yeah, let's back off.
Hmm.
You know, where famous one that I can think of, obviously this is well before our time, but you had the Bay of Pigs. You know,
Oh, Cuba. Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
Russia was going to put weapons of mass destruction on Libyan soil. The Americans were like, that's a little bit too close to my back door. You're not going to do it. And if you do, there's going to be serious, hell to pay. And the Russians blinked or the communists blinked first.
Hmm.
And that was the end of it. No
Yeah.
more, no World War Five or World War, no World War Three.
Hmm.
This was not the war that was going to end all wars. It was just fizzled out because of the word of a president who pretty much said, step out of line. This is what's going to happen. I think it was Khrushchev, maybe. But anyway, if you're looking, as I said, that leadership, that strength doesn't appear to be there. We're not saying that. I'm not saying America hasn't got strength. It's got the biggest army in the world. It spends more on its military budget is probably bigger than the gross domestic product of most countries, right? So it isn't small. But
Yeah.
when you speak to Americans, they will tell you actually their army is quite small. They don't have as many.
Really?
Yeah, supposedly they've done like what the British have done, just cut back.
Bro, they've got 750 military bases around the world
See,
in
no,
over.
so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they are now less than. I'm saying they've cut back on it. We've had relative peace for 80 odd years. We've had little skirmishes. When the last World War ended in 1945, you and I have been alive to not really, to not really see any major. There was the little thing in Iraq,
Yeah.
Kuwait and all that kind of stuff, and Desert Storm, and there was I don't know, the Americans went into Grenada. I mean, there's been little skirmishes, but nothing major. However, that could all change now. Things are looking a lot more ominous.
When you say more major, do you mean more on a global scale, as in loads of different factions? Okay.
I think what I mean is that, so at the present moment in time, as things have turned out, and I don't, if I'm wrong, I could be completely wrong, but we're slowly seeing sides being drawn. You have America in the West, and whatever countries are,
Avengers are assembling,
and then on the other side you have your Chinas, your Russias, you have Iran,
all the emerging markets.
Yes, BRICS maybe potentially, minus India, because China and India don't get on. but what I mean is, you have now opposing factions that are actually quite equal in terms of influence. I mean, just India and China alone make up what, half the population of the earth? There's billions of them.
But do you also think that maybe, I mean, aside from everything else we're talking about, sometimes it's just history that empires rise and fall?
Definitely.
And this is just part of the cycle.
Yeah, I agree.
The influence will dwindle somewhat, obviously not into insignificance, but just not as dominant as before.
Could be. And it could be that is this a change of the? You mean like the changing of the guard? Like, could it be that it could well be? I think that when you have countries like China and Russia, who, as we well know, their influence has expanded, maybe more China than Russia, because obviously Russia's now drowning in Ukraine, but they have filled lots of the voids that were left in Africa, South America, Middle East. They've built infrastructure in these countries, military cooperation. I know that they, things like, we'll build you a harbor, but you got to pay for it. When they couldn't pay for it, I know what, we'll lease it off you for 100 years. Because that's what happens in Sri Lanka. And I believe Pakistan. I think Pakistan also has major debts that it has to pay to, and it will default, because obviously these are big, and they'll just lease it. It makes sense, But also, and these are strategic positions, very strategic positionings, whereby initially, I think you and I did a video a few months back where I said to you that there's these choke points like the Malacca Straits, and there's these other where trade goes through, and America currently has control over these choke points. Well, with these there are choke points on the opposite side. If you and I right now were, Chinese young men talking about the West, we're looking at it from a completely different perspective. And we would be saying, we have bases now. I mean, not 750 bases, obviously. That is never
in over 80 countries.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
But those bases are only as good as the government that rules the country. So if your government, you can have a base there, your base will get overrun very quickly if the people don't want you there. Simple. Like this, it's not even a debate. Case in point, let's look at Africa and the French, right? So having a base don't mean nothing, because the French have learned firsthand about, you've got a base there, but if the people don't want you there, you leave him very quickly. Because you do not want a bloodbath. You want to remove your people to safety, and you might go back in there. You may want to, right, we're going to go in there and help democracy and blah blah blah, but you're getting out straight away before a bloodbath, because the world is watching you. So yes, they have these bases. There is still the dominance in that sense. And I'm not saying that it's the end, but I do believe that they're sharing influence now, where before they weren't.
for sure. And
I believe they're sharing it.
what's your take on the debt situation? Do you think that has an influence on it in some way? I mean, at the moment I think their debt to GDP ratio is something like 129%.
Yeah, it's not manageable. They will
It's like
they will have obviously
it's
Congress
34
got to,
trillion, $34 trillion.
as you know, Congress
Mm,
just continually up the debt ceiling.
the ceiling,
You know,
yeah.
we can't. Once it matures and they realize, well, once the interest rate kicks in, it's almost like when us as simple people, we might run a little $2,000 on a credit card, and then it gets to the term, and you think, oh, I need to balance transfer. No, what do you call it
Hmm.
again? Not
Yeah,
balance.
it
Is it
is balance transfer.
I
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
balance. I need to transfer the debt
yeah,
to
yeah,
another card.
yeah.
Well,
That always works out well.
it you just keep transferring. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be in this bank now. Oh, do you know what? They're doing 0% for 2 years. Crack on, move over there.
Mhm.
Ah, I ain't paid it yet. How
Yeah.
about we move it again? And they will do, but eventually, like all things, creditors will eventually say, enough is enough. We want it back. And all those military bases, all those battleships, all of those destroyers,
Mm.
bombers, personnel, actually, all those people want their wages, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They got to get they got to get paid. If they don't get paid, they're going to down tools very quick. And I
Mm.
believe that this whole idea of strength, there almost needs to be a black swan event to change the mindsets of people so that they completely back.
Another one.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe that we are now, because this, as I said to you already, with this election, its spotlight is going to be on American democracy. How does the
Mm.
engine work? Does it work? Well, we're going to see. We're going to see what happens. Will the winner accept? Will the loser accept that he's lost and not create another civil war? Almost, these are the kind of things that every transfer of power.
I think that's the biggest question.
Well, every transfer of power,
I think
there's
that's the biggest
always been
question.
an acceptance of losing. Every
Mm.
every when they look at the polls, it's like midnight hour time, but in the day, it's you get to a point where well,
Mm.
I'm going to get that state. I'm going to get that state as well. I won't get that one, but the votes in that state will push me over, past the post
Yep.
to win.
Yeah.
And so I know. And then usually what happens is your phone rings. I concede defeat.
Mm.
That is how it goes.
Mm.
That was almost the process. That's how it's always been.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for a good fight, but I
Mm.
lost. I
Mm-hmm.
accept loss, and then that person will go on to their conference,
Mm.
and they will tell their electorate, the people that voted for them, that are crying and sad that they lost. Look, guys, we lost.
Yeah.
You now need to go behind the new leader. That is the bigger picture. The bigger picture is you support the person that won. You may not like them,
Or you go through the other door and you sit down with your 3-lettered friends, those the alphabet boys, and
yeah.
you might say, well, we're not conceding jack.
And that obviously is dictatorial. But what I'm saying is that the world is watching. They cannot have another debacle like what happened the last time round, because it's embarrassing and it showed weakness. And I believe the world is a very different place from the last set of elections, because, as you said, BRICS is now much more. I mean, yeah, BRICS still isn't it's still just letters on a piece of paper, but they are openly trying to de-dollarize. They are openly they are defying.
Well,
Russia. Sorry, go on.
Russia and Iran are trading and operating outside of SWIFT.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Russia
saying.
and China are operating outside of SWIFT. They're doing their own transactions, like you said, without the dollar.
Yeah.
This is like new uncharted waters, isn't it? So,
yeah. And I believe, and obviously, you know, the beauty of conversations is that you and I are talking, and we may be seeing it from one point of view, but the people that watch the videos, they check out the shorts, or they watch our videos afterwards, they have a different spin on it. They will say, oh no, you know, don't, this is just a fly in the plan. There's always, you know, there's always been accesses of evil. But when you realize that the axis of evil, say a case in point with someone like Iraq, Saddam Hussein was being supported by the CIA when he was getting to power.
Yeah.
You know, he was being supported by them before he came into power. He turned on his masters, but he was their friends at one point, and then he wasn't. You know, this is completely different. You know, China has never been friends. There's never been this situation where it's like, oh, you know, thank you. This is a trade deal. You outsourced all of your labor because you didn't want to pay your people a wage. You thought, I can maximize profit by outsourcing all of your trade to my country, i.e. China.
Yep.
China has then built up its country, used the money. Yeah, I'm not saying, obviously, there are issues with the Uyghurs, and there's obviously lots of things that are going on there that we don't know about.
Yep.
But from the country nation building, they have done what they have: put money into roads, built massive train systems and
infrastructure.
They've you know, they've invested in their military, because obviously they have a military. They have they've gone in diplomatic conversations with, because remember, China 30 years ago didn't exist. It was a closed book. Their market was closed to us. We didn't know anything about them. You know, they just didn't. They might as well have not existed. I used to always wonder. I wonder what it's like in China, because we never really hear anything about them. Now we do. Now they are here. You know, if you go into central London, who's a tourist taking photos? You know, we're talking. They are here. They have a very capitalist communist system. They run two systems at the same time, and it works for them. Well, going forwards, the question is going to be, what next? What next will be? Because if they're already openly saying no, what you know, if you say to me right now, Johnny, I want you to stop buying beer from the off license, and I say to you, I ain't stopping. I like beer. I'm going to enjoy buying my beer. You ain't stopping me. Now it's back on you. What are you going to do to stop me? But
good point.
But you owe me money. I lent you 50 quid 6 months ago, and you ain't paid me back yet. So what right have you to tell me where I spend my money when you owe me money? Because that's the reality. The reality is that they are in debt. They are going to have to default on that debt. Well, they won't default on it. But if they did default on it, then, well, it could be a house of cards. We could be seeing the end of everything we know. Could be, or it could be done. Go on.
No, I was going to say that all of what we've said so far, has been of the narrative that the dominance is over. Right?
It's weakening, I believe.
It's weakening, but
I wouldn't say over. But it's weakening.
Okay, what are the arguments? What are the arguments that say no, the dominance isn't over, and here's why? What would you say?
Because if you were going to be really, honestly, totally brutal, and I'm going to be very, very brutal about this. If I've got a gun and you've got a knife, I'm going to win. And ultimately, if we go back to basics, if we go back to old school, I'm going to just unalive you before you can unalive me. That's the reality. The reality is that the
My
stockpile,
gun's bigger than yours.
Yes, the stockpile of nuclear. You know, they got nuclear stuff that they could just drop things if they really wanted to go gangster. You know? And that is obviously,
and I think that's an option. That's an option.
But as we have now realized, because this is the other thing which is quite interesting, On China's back door, there's this little country that no one really knows about a lot about them. We don't really deal with them in any way. They've been sanctioned into the hilt, but they have a nuclear program in North Korea.
Mm.
Now China might not have it, but their friends do. So in a sense, there is. Mrs. Morrison has said hi, hubby, and hi, Leon. Thank you very much, Mrs. Morrison, for popping your head in.
Hey, what's up?
She had a go at me because she said hello last week and I didn't put her up on the screen, so I got to do it now, or else I won't at the end of it.
Well
But
done.
ultimately, Iran also has a nuclear program.
Mhm.
Russia has a nuclear program.
Exactly.
So you're suddenly thinking, well, okay, so in the West, to my knowledge, you've got the French, the English or the British, the Americans, maybe the Spanish. I don't know. I don't know if they have or not. But ultimately, those three countries have got loads of them, and that's the thing. Even when they were demilitarizing themselves and destroying arms and blah 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 in the 80s, they still kept a stockpile, and they still got they still got loads ultimately. Anyway, if you're looking at the other side, well, they're now talking to each other, and they're openly talking to each. Before you might go, listen, I can't really be seen to be talking to you because I could get kicked out of the SWIFT program, and I could get kicked out of. My national debt will explode, and I'll have running inflation, or I will have the CIA all up in my business.
Exactly.
I can't be seen talking to you.
Yep.
Well, that ruse is now over. Russia are saying, yeah, I will openly buy Iran. Well, actually, Russia doesn't even need to buy, Iranian oil. It's got its own. But Iran has got drones.
Yep.
And it's got weaponry that it's
these guys are going to barter and do their own trade.
Exactly.
100%.
And that is outside of the SWIFT system, which probably would, this is the other thing as well. This would probably explain, could be wrong. Obviously, I could be brought up, corrected in the comments later on, but this could probably explain why the status quo, the banks, central banks of of the West have always hated crypto, because ultimately SWIFT is visible. I can see, you're spending there, you're spending here, you're doing this, you're doing that. And for you to do that, you've got to go through us. Well, the whole principle of the crypto is that it's not, well, I know we've had our conversation about centralized, what is and what isn't centralized, but it's not, it doesn't have as much scrutiny in terms of government oversight. And so it could well be that, it could well be that 5-10 years ago, the governments were like, whoa, the Russians are pumping a lot of money into crypto, Why? I don't know, but it's going to this number, it's key. Where's this going? And it could well be that was just governments trading with each other and obviously building up a massive war chest that now when the Americans go, right, to punish you, you are now no longer in the SWIFT system. And the Russians have gone, oh no, like that's really bad because we've not used the SWIFT system for about 10 years.
Exactly.
Actually, we don't care. And so you've now got bullies. Now, I'm not saying that, we can surmise that the CIA are there or thereabouts doing what they need to do to get things done. We don't know what the future may hold. We don't know who they will destabilize next, because ultimately that's how they work. They destabilize the people and they make the people think that they have, overthrown, the Arab Spring. Yes, it was the people. There's a little bit of help from outside to help you with that.
Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. Yep.
So we've already seen that, and we're not saying that it won't happen again, because it could well do. Could well happen again. We don't know.
Probably happening now.
But there's a high probability that these things. But I also believe that, and don't get me wrong, because this is the other thing as well that I was thinking about. I am very grateful that for the last 100 years, the American world power was in power. I'm grateful for that because it has given peace to the world. The only caveat to that is that it only ever benefited America. It didn't. We got peace. America got money. All of the
And to
cream.
be fair, the peace that you're talking about depends where you are in the world.
Yes, 100%. And as long as you play ball, as long as you will toe the American line, it's okay. It's gravy. Buy your oil with dollars. Beautiful. Make sure that you come to us first before there's any conversation. Beautiful. Get our under. We will dictate to you how your nation runs. Beautiful. But the minute you switch and say, I think that the Europeans have had their own single currency. I think Africa would benefit from a single currency. Oh, you need democracy.
Yep.
Let's remove them and look what's left.
There was a thing where a retired general spoke about there being 7 countries on a list.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if I remember, all of them
have all been
done,
destabilized.
Except one.
Yeah, Iran.
Yeah.
Iran is the only one that was left.
Yep. So
but don't you think it's interesting? But don't you think it's very interesting that general, when he was rolling off, Libya, Iraq, Iran, I don't know where else he mentioned, but but I don't remember him saying North Korea. And if he did, then I'm corrected. But if he didn't do it because they got a nuclear program. They've got their own nukes. They may not fire them good. We don't know, but if they're ballistic,
that's the rules of bullies, right?
Yeah, bully the ones that can't bully back.
That you can bully, yeah, exactly.
I think that the US dominance has weakened, but I don't think it's a sign of like immediate decline. I don't think America's suddenly going to go into the toilet.
Yeah,
but
remember.
History has shown us that every world power goes through a decay. It goes through. So the Roman Empire went through a decay. It got too big. It couldn't fight the Visigoths and the Celts, and now I've got to fight the Carthaginians and then go off and fight the Persians all at the same time. They couldn't do it. It was too big. So they co-opted them in. Become a citizen. The Brits, they were ruling, the empire didn't set on the British, and it got too big. They suddenly were like, India was like, well, we want freedom. We want our own, we want to rule ourselves. Yeah, we'll give you your independence. They were going to take it anyway. You've got, and that didn't happen overnight. That took 30 years of that decay, that decay of, because as I said at the very beginning, I am grateful for the American peace because there were freedoms because I was in the UK. So because we were shoulder to shoulder with the Americans, we got all the benefits as well. Being here, having the freedom, I have the freedom, relative freedom, to be able to say what I want, when I want, go where I want, when I want, and I have a passport to be able to go around the world if I want. I have the luxury of having a job that I can fund my own life and live in relative peace. I'm not worried that my next door neighbors are going to come around and, kick me out of my home and take away what I have. And that has happened because of almost that blanket dominance of America being a world power. It ruled the waves, stopped, had a massive armada, massive navy, so trade could run freely and there was no issues. But we've now seen a slow decay of, some random people in Yemen or wherever it is who are
the Houthis.
These people that come out of nowhere that are basically stopping trade,
destabilizing.
And things are starting to slow down. This is where it happens. It's where people start to say, I want more. I don't want to be in the shadow of this anymore. Why is it that I'm spending 12 hours of my working day in a sweatshop building, making some trainers that are going to be sold for 25 times what it's cost me to make, and I don't benefit from the profits of that. You get what I mean? Because these are the kind of things that you're looking at. For the last 30 years, it was, if you lifted anything up at the bottom of it, it said made in China. What's interesting, I read an article that now things are getting so expensive in China, they've outsourced their factories to Mexico. Trust me, you need to do
really.
Chinese businesses is one of the, just when we get off air, just go online and just check. It is quite scary that Chinese companies are now building factories in Mexico because it's cheaper for them to outsource the work to another country.
Wow.
It is out. It's insane. This is the global market for you. It's amazing.
That I did not know. Whoa.
Honestly, just when we get off air, just you'll be amazed. I couldn't believe it for myself. I thought, what? Because in my head, I thought, well, China, this is the end game. Everything cheap now is from China. Not realizing that people in China are bettering their lives.
Yeah.
Chinese government has raised millions of people out of poverty, and they suddenly said, well, I don't want to just have nothing. I want more. I want a nice car. I want to own a nice house. If I can, if I can buy one, I want a nice house. I want to be able to raise my children in peace and have the things that I see normally in the West. But I don't want to come and work for 12 hours and earn the equivalent of £10 a day. And that's what's happened. It's just the natural order of things that now they're going, well, the Chinese are like, well, we need to maximize profits. Where can we send our factories? Mexico.
That's actually wild.
And Mexico is the perfect place for the American market because it's just you drive it into
logistically,
the country.
That's right.
It's perfect. But that has only come about because of the hegemony that we had as one world power. And so, in a sense, I am grateful that we had that because it allowed many of the freedoms in the West. To hell with the people in Africa and Asia, but in the West, it's okay. So those freedoms were there. Everywhere else, they stuck two fingers up at them and said, we'll benefit off the backs of your children. All those diamonds.
And so when we look at cycles and the way that everything works, you must understand how that's going to turn around. And 100%. Then those other countries will then enjoy a period and time of peace and freedom.
Definitely. I also believe that these new alliances, if they are based on, because like most alliances, they usually end up with war. And I hope that we can find a peaceful, there's a TV show, I think it was called The Man in the High Castle or something like that, where the Second World War was won by the Axis powers. And basically, the world is split in half. One half is run by the Japanese, and the other half is run by the Nazis. But as bad as it sounds, there was order in both nations had order, but it was wrong because obviously it's a dystopian world, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I can see, moving forward, maybe not me, but maybe my children or my children's children may live in a world where there are multiple powers that are governing. Europe, I believe, is a world power. It is. It's there as long as they can, side with each other through NATO. They are a force to be reckoned with, because one attack on one is an attack on all of them. So, arguably, if they, with that pact they all signed, they're one body. As long as you don't fight them, then they're fine. They can squabble with each other. But attack one, you attack them all. Africa, I think, over the next 100 years, will definitely raise its people out of poverty. They've got all the natural all those natural resources in the ground that they've got there. They've got the people, and most importantly, as we've discussed probably very many times before, they have the demographic. They've got young people. Everywhere else is getting old, Africa hasn't got old yet. They're still young.
It's the youngest continent.
Youngest continent, which means that they arguably will have, in years to come, a very strong young middle class. They could potentially, and that will drive innovation. It will drive, who knows? I see that in the future, but I also see that in Asia. I also see Asia. I know that China has a very old demographic, but I also see that the innovation could come out of there as well. There's lots of South America demographic, same thing. I think that there's lots of places at the moment that fell by the wayside in terms of its influence that maybe in times to come will change. So just obviously we've hit the hour and we always end up going over. I was good last week. I apologize. In terms of the dominance, I believe that it's a decay, not an end of. It's a decay. From my books, I see it as a decay unless there's a black swan event, and then we may be talking about something else. But who knows what that will be? We don't know. Any concluding comments before we go, LD?
No, I concur with you. It's global dominance. It's definitely on the decline, but I don't think it will become insignificant anytime soon. After it accepts that it cannot use brute force globally, I think it will pivot more to soft power and diplomacy, and you'll see that type of role, a more collaborative role, start to emerge with all of the new emerging nations that are going to come forward. That will be strategic partnerships.
I almost feel like saying to you that the US needs to go back to its basics. What the country was built on: innovation, democracy, freedom. All the things they fought the British for to get their independence. They need to go back to basics if they want to go back to being.
I don't know about that.
If they want to go back, obviously it was freedom for some.
It was built on a lot of murder.
So, sorry, I say this again.
It was built on the slaughter
but there was a large portion of people that had no freedom. We get it. But what I'm saying is that for them to get back to their untouched and complete dominant area, they need to go back to basics. If they carry on the way they're going, then I think that the rug will be pulled from under them by opposing nations, because I think that's just how the cylindrical history of world powers go.
We have to agree to disagree.
And as always, this is why I love talking to you, because we have these conversations and we agree to disagree. So that was the discussion about the world power that is the US. If you like what you've heard, please hit the thumbs up for me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are small, but we're growing, and we have a weekly discussion, 6 p.m. UK time. I don't know what that time is around the world for you, but if you are able to, please tune in and hang out with us as we discuss all different subjects. It's your choice next week, Mr. D. So on that note, thank you very much for hanging out with us, and we will see you in the next one.